Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to step inside one patient's personal diary for a raw, day-by-day account of a hospital stay for leukemia. This isn't a story from a medical textbook. We're going to see this fight through their own words, exactly as it all went down.
And this is the reality that frames the entire story. It's a direct quote from the patient on the very day they were admitted. It really sets the stage for a time when your body is at its most vulnerable and the hospital is supposed to be your one safe place. So we're going to follow this journey just as it was documented, chronologically. Every single challenge, every fear, every small win, it's all recorded. This gives us a completely unfiltered look at what it's really like to navigate a healthcare crisis from the inside. Okay, so why was the patient even in the hospital in the first place? Well, it all starts with a condition called aplasia, which is a really direct and dangerous consequence of their chemotherapy treatment. Basically, the very treatment that's fighting the cancer also just wipes out the body's ability to make essential blood cells. And that leaves the patient completely defenseless against bleeding and, what's most critical here, infection. So being in a protected hospital environment isn't just a good idea. It's pretty much the only thing standing between the patient and a potentially fatal illness. Look at this number, 140. That was the patient's white blood cell count. Now, to put that in perspective for you, a healthy person's count is somewhere between 4,000 and 11,000. So at 140, the body has, for all intents and purposes, no immune system. This is exactly why being in the hospital was an absolute necessity.
But the sanctuary that we're expecting, it quickly became a source of major anxiety. See, the patient had stayed in this hospital before, but this time something was very different. And this brings us to what they called the tale of two wards.
And right here, this is the core of the problem. On a previous stay, the patient was on the third floor. Think sealed, highly controlled, positive pressure ventilation, all designed specifically to protect someone like them. But this time, they were put on the fourth floor, a general ward with open windows, no special air filtration, and as the patient put it, much lower standards of hygiene and care.
You can just feel the anxiety in those words, can't you? The one place that is supposed to be the safest suddenly feels incredibly compromised. The patient's trust in their own environment is just gone, and it forces them into this state of constant high alert right from day one.
So this feeling of being vulnerable, which was really fueled by the unsafe surroundings on that fourth floor, it basically led the patient to become their own watchdog. They identified 6 critical moments where they felt their safety was at risk, and they realized they had to step in themselves.
Yep, 6 specific times. The patient called them red flags. These were moments where a simple mistake or a lapse in care could have had really severe, maybe even fatal consequences. Let's walk through what they saw.
You know, the really crucial thing here is the pattern. This wasn't just one mistake. I mean, it starts with being on the wrong ward entirely. Then they had to catch a missed pre-medication that would have caused a huge allergic reaction. They had to refuse risky procedures, remind the staff about forgotten critical antifungal drugs, and even push doctors to re-examine a symptom they had just dismissed. It's really a stunning example of a patient being forced to advocate for their own life.
And then, on day 4, the patient's worst fears came true. The situation escalated fast, going from just a concern to a full-blown medical crisis, which triggered a whole cascade of urgent actions. This was the trigger, a fever of 39.2 degrees Celsius. That's about 102.6 Fahrenheit. Now, for an aplastic patient, someone with 0 white blood cells, a fever this high is a 5-alarm fire. It means there's an infection somewhere, and the body has absolutely no way to fight it.
The next 72 hours were just chaos. The fever spikes, so they start IV antibiotics, but it doesn't break. The team starts to suspect the central PICC line, the patient's main IV access, is infected, so they stop using it. This means every single blood draw, every infusion now requires a new, painful needle stick. They add more antibiotics. The patient gets moved between rooms on the already chaotic 4th floor, until, finally, a negative COVID test clears them for transfer to the safety of the 3rd floor.
Okay, so now they're on the correct ward. The immediate crisis is over, but the fight? Oh, it was far from finished. The road to recovery turned out to be a slow, grueling process, and it was filled with new complications and daily struggles. And just to add to the challenge, a test came back showing the patient was carrying VRE. That's a highly antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Now, while it wasn't in immediate danger to them, as their blood counts were starting to come back, It's a huge risk to other vulnerable patients on the floor. And that meant strict isolation, which just added another layer of difficulty to their whole stay.
The days that followed were just a grind. They were battling severe swelling with diuretics, dealing with the emotional side of hair loss from the chemo, and on top of it all, enduring painful daily needle sticks for blood draws. But slowly, and I mean very slowly, things started to turn around. The infection finally subsided, and those blood counts began their long climb back to safer levels.
And then, finally, on October 11th, after 13 long nights, the patient was discharged. And they chose to summarize the entire ordeal, not with feelings, but with some stark, really powerful data.
This is how the patient decided to sum up their stay, by the numbers. 13 nights spent in 4 different rooms. 2 days with a dangerous fever. A total of 11 blood and platelet transfusions. 3 separate IV lines had to be placed after the main one was compromised. The numbers, they don't lie. They paint such a vivid picture of a really difficult and intensely medical ordeal.
And all of this, it brings us to this final, crucial question. This patient's vigilance, their own medical knowledge, it likely prevented several very serious, maybe even life-threatening complications. And it leaves you wondering, in a system that's designed to care for the most vulnerable, how much of the burden of safety should really fall on the patient themselves? It's a question that's worth thinking about long after this is over.